Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for an album review, the first album review of 2015, Death Grips Fashion Week. Death Grips, West Coast, California, experimental hip-hop trio, one of the most mysterious bands existing today, and they have come through with a new project here, an instrumental album, and it arrives at a pretty peculiar time in the group's career. From 2011 to 2012, Death Grips had an immense winning streak with their debut breakout mixtape, their commercial peak with The Money Store, and then the violent break away from their record label Epic Records with the sudden self-release of the album No Love Deep Web. Then the band followed up that record in 2013 with Government Plates, their shortest release so far aside from the EP they debuted with in 2011, and maybe the most disappointing release in their discography at that point for me, because while the first half did have some of their best material on it, the second half's songs felt a little redundant in my opinion, but I still got it! Anyway, in 2014, the band got me excited once again with the announcement of a new double album, the title being The Powers That Be, and they saw fit to release the first half of it on its own. I reviewed it earlier last year, and there were a lot of things about this record that made it stick out in the Death Grips discography. For one, Bjork recorded original vocals for this record, which Death Grips sample all over this album, and sort of use this vocal cut as like an instrument. A lot of the songs on this project follow a pretty linear structure, not much in the way of repetition sometimes. All the tracks segue into one another very fluidly, and there are a lot of very noisy, jarring sound effects all over this LP. This is definitely one of Death Grips' most tangled albums so far. Very synthetic, very digital. However, 2014 finished out with no appearance of the second half of The Powers That Be, Jenny Death. But what they did give us in 2014 was a breakup notice, scrawled on a napkin and then posted via a picture onto Facebook. However, the group still said Jenny Death was on the way, but didn't really give us a clear answer as to when that was, and so, as a result, impatient fans started typing in all caps all over the internet, Jenny Death when? But this past December, Death Grips rose from the abyss to drop one of the most intense, noisy, and kind of catchy singles they've put out in a very long time, Inanimate Sensation. So, in a sense, Jenny Death at least felt closer at this point, but this music video gave Death Grips fans another reason to be excited, because it drew attention toward a Twitter account, a Death Grips Twitter account that most fans assumed was fake because it seemed to rise out of the ether when the band had demolished its official verified Twitter account, which happened months and months and months ago at this point. But this particular Twitter account had a screenshot from the Inanimate Sensation video, which was posted back in August, months before December. Not only that, but there's a recent post on this Twitter account of the two giant inflatable pills which have appeared at numerous Death Grip shows, and this image was shown in the cover art to the Money Store artwork. And interestingly enough, on this very same Twitter account, it is said that people think we're broken up, but we're really not, and we're going to go on tour. So if Death Grips actually went on tour and they came back together as a band and assembled post this weird breakup thing, I wouldn't be too surprised, because they have screwed with their fans in the music industry in the past with the way they broke away from their record label, releasing numerous albums out of the blue online, being complete no-shows at scheduled concerts, and sending their fans on completely wild goose chases online. Even this new project of theirs, as reported by Chart Attack, they said that at least a version of Fashion Week had been sitting on Reddit for about 4 months without anybody really realizing it had been Death Grips, or with many people sort of casting it off as just being another person faking, pretending to be Death Grips and trying to get their music heard. But Death Grips did share a zip of it on their website and have posted all the songs from this record on their YouTube. And the track titles are strange as well and tell another story, each one of them being titled something like Runway J, Runway E, after the whole Fashion Week thing. But these letters spell out the phrase Jenny Death when? And I guess the answer of that would be Fashion Week, because if you go look online and look up when Fashion Week is, at least the New York Fashion Week event coming up is in the second week of February, and there have been some credible sources, including record stores, that have said that the second half of the Powers That Be, or at least the Powers That Be as a whole project, will be completed on February 10th when this album releases. Now, as unpredictable as Death Grips can be, it's hard not to see pacification as being the intention behind this record, to sort of give them this project, let them know when Jenny Death is coming out, especially since the track titles here spell out the phrase uttered by frustrated fans just waiting in the dark for when Death Grips will release their potentially final album. I'm not completely sure as to whether or not the material on this project is new or is it old, but there are a lot of similarities between some of the synth timbres and the drum timbres here. I wouldn't be all that surprised if I were to find out that much of the material here was conceived in the same session or creative period. Fashion Week is pretty much a group of interesting beats, a lot of which feature verse, chorus, verse structures. Occasionally there's a bridge here, but for the most part the first half of each track mirrors the second half of each track. There are portions that feel like they were just cut and paste from earlier portions. And this was the case of some of the tracks on Government Plates, but instead of feeling incessant or kind of obnoxious, some of the songs here feel just a little limp, like, where are we going with this? Especially some of the toned down, more ethereal cuts here. Even though Death Grips continues to push sonic boundaries and just try new things on this new album, Ride's vocals for me continue to be a selling point for the band. So when I hear his role, at least in that regard, kind of diminished on a Death Grips project, it just becomes an overall less exciting experience for me. Still, there are plenty of highlights in the track listing here though, like with the song Runway E, the second Runway E, which has these squelched, pulsating rhythmic synth lines with some very jittery percussion hanging in the background. Or the first Runway E, which has all these just stuttering, noisy, dubstep-like synth lines. Or the first Runway N or Runway H, which feature these bright synthesizers and guitars on Runway H that just seem so sweet and so sugary that they're almost inappropriate for a Death Grips song. And these tracks actually kind of sound like something that Battles would do on one of their two LPs, except just maybe a little more skeletal, stripped back, and simplified. There's the second Runway N, which feels like a slow, sludgy, heavy, synthetic, and electronic piece of 90s grunge. Like this is something Kurt Cobain could be singing very comfortably over. It's so mid-paced, it's so depressing. The bassy, distorted synths on this track just feel like they're coming from a guitar. And I love what sounds like glockenspiel samples on Runway W, and then they are pitched down to these very deep, metallic, resonant, rhythmic melodies. And Runway A, there's something about this track that just the break beats in the background and the siren-like synthesizers that are very dissonant all over this track. Even though I wish it were a little heavier, just wish it wasn't as lightweight, there's something about this track that just makes me want to compare it to 90s IDM or jungle. Even though they're not directly making that style of music, it just seems like a really big influence here. As much as I like most of the tracks here, there's not really a single track that I hate. There is just kind of an element of, this doesn't feel totally finished, or if there were vocals here, I just have a feeling they would have layered more details into these beats, or they would have, cut out certain parts, added certain parts, made the second verse of each one just feel just the least bit different from the first. There are some tracks here that are pretty brief. Maybe some songs were just composed so that they would have enough letters to spell out the phrase Jenny Death When. I don't know. I think overall this served its purpose, and I look forward very excitedly to the release of Jenny Death. And occasionally I could see myself returning to a lot of the instrumentals here, though I do hope that none of them really turn up on Jenny Death, because even if I do end up enjoying that record when it is finally released, I think if a bulk of the instrumentals landed on this record, it would kind of spoil a lot of the surprise. I'm feeling a decent to strong 7 on this LP. Transition! If you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Death Grips, Jenny Death, forever.